yet? Is it? Is it? Okay, we're good. We're good. I'm having trouble hearing myself on here. But first, I have to thank everyone for coming out. 9 a.m., the first event after the biggest parties, always a tough time slot. It was very tempting to sleep one off. I had to pull myself out of bed this morning, so really glad everyone could come out. So today we're going to be talking about the Quest ecosystem, which to me is unanimous with the current state of VR and in standalone VR. What Meta has done for the ecosystem has really brought us, I think, to out of a esoteric niche area to really becoming like a mainstream tech sector. And so we're going to talk about what that currently looks like. And I have joining me some really talented developers and founders in the space who I've had the pleasure of really getting to know and dive deep onto these topics with. So a little bit about me. My name's JP Minetos. I work at Hartman Capital, and we invest into immersive technology. I lead the VR department there, so I'm very infatuated with this space. I'm going to have all of our other panelists now introduce themselves, and Emily, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, hello, my name is Emily O'Neill. I'm the creative director at Lighthouse. We make education games. Our titles on the Quest store include Nano and Color Space, and we work pretty extensively with middle schools and high schools across the country to get education VR in schools.
My name is Arturo Perez. I'm the CEO of Kluge. We are a game studio. Our flagship game is Synth Riders, a rhythm game. We're working on our next title, which is Final Fury, so a classic arcade fighting game. And then we also work as a work-for-hire studio with Meta and Horizon Worlds.
Hey everyone, I'm Almir Brljak. I'm the co-founder and COO of Synth Studio. We're based out of Toronto, Canada. We're an XR developer and publisher, best known for Swordsman VR, which is a platform bestseller. Currently, our focus is solely on combat across VR and MR.
Hi, I'm Pablo Colapinto. I'm head of immersive and experience design at Nexus Studios. We're a global creative studio focused on film and experience design across music, sports, and branded content. On the experience design side, some of our flagships have been Gorillas Presents, which we launched a couple years ago in Times Square. MLB Next, which was a all-star game AR overlay, live data overlay for VPS for all seats, for all fans to watch overlays of the game on their phone. And then on the Quest store, most recently Headspace XR, which is brand new category, which we'll talk a little bit about today.
That's great. Yeah, so we have definitely a diverse skill set, but the synergy factor here is that everyone is building on Quest. You guys saw Palmer's talk yesterday. He was sharing that in year one of Quest 2 sales, it did about 20 million. We estimate that number now to be about 40 million headsets in circulation, which has just been incredible penetration for the entire VR industry. So the first way I want to go about talking about this is I think right now it is still primarily a gaming device. As in 70% of the top 100 applications in Quest are gaming related. We've started to see a few standouts. We've seen like Emily's product get App of the Year, which was a non-game, but it still has the consensus that it is primarily driven by games. And I kind of want to get everyone's opinion on this to see, what do you guys think of the Quest? Is it a gaming console or can it do more than that? I'm going to start with you, Arturo.
Well, it wasn't conceived as a gaming console, so like DK1 was the original conception, and I think it was meant to be both sides, and we have both sides represented today. But it's definitely its primary use case prior to this day, and it's probably going to still drive the revenue moving forward. But I think with the announcement yesterday of the lifestyle category, you're seeing a deeper interest in non-gaming, and you also see the fitness use case came up, and while it's similar, like FitXR and Supernatural may be similar to Synth Riders in gameplay, but they're more intentionally towards fitness, whereas we're more of an incidental. So I'd argue that it is split, and you should go in the one that you're called to go to the most.
Yeah, I want to echo that point, but also add that while there might be apps on the Quest store that aren't games, they're definitely gamified, and I think that's the kind of perspective we'll see moving forward is that even though apps don't have a strong gaming focus, the vast majority of the apps on the Quest store will have that gamified component.
Emily, do you want to add anything on this since you have a lot of game design in your non-game?
Yeah, I think my perspective, obviously the last 4 years I've been working at an education company, and we did decide to make our release on the Quest Store very much a game, where if you get good at the game, you also learn science. So that was definitely a very intentional decision for our release on the Quest Store. I do want to say, though, as my little piece on education, is that it's just an absolutely revolutionary application of VR. And it's such a drastic leap ahead from where education is, whereas gaming for VR and the headset will always be competing with PC and console gaming, and education is just such a drastic leap forward for the technology. So I think there's a little bit of an availability bias going on right now with how we see the headset and how we see the technology. It's available in the game space. Gamers have access to the headset by and large, but there's less access to the headset in education in classrooms. And so I think we'll see a large change in how VR is talked about and treated, and I think that we'll also see that reflected in the Quest Store. But yeah, we obviously made the decision to make a game for our commercial release on the Quest Store as opposed to just like a pure education experience. So, yeah.
Pablo?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that, you know, as an ecosystem with rules that are constantly evolving, rules of engagement for how you even use the OS itself that are constantly evolving, and sort of a built-in reward system in the form of, you know, sensory delight, you know, that it is really useful to think of it as a gaming device. And so to echo what Arturo was saying, that you know, even for instance in Headspace XR, just adding a little bit of gamification in the form of things that work like streaks and reward systems and discovery, I think is sort of essential for even the lifestyle stuff. So like, you know, if you want to have a, you know, photo app sharing thing, you know, you're gonna want to think about ways to bring users back to actually put the device on their head, and a lot of that's going to be learned from gaming techniques.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do kind of want to transition then. If we're talking about the whole app ecosystem, one of the biggest issues that we've seen, or a lot of developers have come across, has been understanding the differences between being on Quest main store and being on App Lab. So the Quest main store, this is the first-party applications. You're able to find them in natural discovery versus App Lab. You have to search for them directly. There's about 2,400 apps right now that are on App Lab and about 600 that are main store. In order to get main store approval, you need to speak directly with Meta, and they need to hand approve you on. So I do kind of want to get your guys' takes on the differences between main store versus App Lab, the advantages, disadvantages, and how it positions the broader Quest ecosystem. And I think I'm going to start with Almir for this one.
Yeah, I think there's a couple layers to that question, but obviously the disadvantage that you have is the accessibility to visibility. That's something that you have to create on your own. But what I found to be a huge value add from App Lab, it really allows you to establish a tight iterative feedback with your community. The expectations aren't as high as when you get to official Quest launch. And the way that we approached it was through two sets of KPIs. And one was how engageful was the app and the rating of the app. And the way that we built those out was through community. We really focused in on building out our Discord, establishing a tight iterative feedback loop, and then tracking our rating month over month, and then going to Meta being like, hey, we're hitting every single KPI that gives the indication that this would be valuable to your ecosystem. And the final note is, I think when you get to App Lab, you're really trying to figure out how to get to the Quest Store, at least the devs that I've had the conversation with, when in reality, you should be looking for the opportunity through App Lab onto the Quest Store. The one thing that we did is we looked at all the combat games available in the market that were on the official Quest Store, read all their not so great reviews, and then found our opportunity in there. So when we looked at combat, the biggest issue with combat was there's not a challenge. It's great, like I feel like this power fantasy and this incredible warrior, but there was no real challenge. So we took that as an opportunity and then went to App Lab to prove out, do that users actually want the challenge? Turns out they did, and Swordsman graduated, and the rest is history.
So do you see App Lab as more of a testing ground? I think something I find when I talk with a lot of developers is they think that when they publish an App Lab, they want to have a finished game. Do you think your game should be completely finished? Should be treated like a beta by the time it gets on App Lab? How do you see that?
I think you can take it in both the directions. I think you could definitely use it as an early access testing ground, but then you could also use it from a perspective of product validation for a finished product.
Arturo, do you have anything you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I mean, I see App Lab more and more as like, used to see Steam Early Access, and like Synth Riders got launched in 2018 on Steam Early Access, and it was not a very robust game when we launched it, and the community really helped us build it and gave us great feedback, and that's how the game, made it to the Quest store a year later. So I think I see App Lab as the same use case, and for Final Fury, we are thinking of first going to App Lab. When we initially conceptualized Final Fury, which was 3 years ago now, we got approved for the store, and Meta was like, you have to not touch App Lab, you have to go straight to the store. Nowadays, they think about it much differently. Now they're like encouraging App Lab before we go to the store, even though we could bypass it. And we're going to take advantage of that, because it is a great way to build rapport with the community, have the low stakes, and the store, we see it more as the best version of our game, not the first version.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that we're starting to see more of that, where developers get more leeway from the community by launching an App Lab first. The expectation's a little bit lower. We can take some jank, it can have some problems, and it's really a time to, I think, build a more intimate relationship with your community, to then figure out what the community wants, what needs to be fixed, and then get it primed for a really good main store launch. Now, Emily, you guys had a different experience. You guys bypassed App Lab altogether and went straight onto main store. Was there any hiccups in that process that you have resentment for not going on to App Lab first?
I think that what they're saying in terms of App Lab being a great way of getting initial feedback on the experience, on whether you're meeting the audience where they're at, I think is incredibly valuable. And there's not a great ecosystem for testing VR right now super robustly. I think that there's a lot of systems that are coming together of like getting titles in front of players before you release them, but there's not established channels like there are for other gaming platforms and other types of software. So yeah, I think that would have been really great as an option to have. But at the same time, I can't really complain, because there's tons of great titles that get caught in App Lab and don't make it to the main Quest store, and that's a major problem in the pipeline. So we were really lucky to be able to go straight to the store and get that visibility. So it's there's trade-offs.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And something we've seen recently, too, is that there have been a lot of applications that have been able to build millions of dollars in revenue just on App Lab and without even making it to the store. And I think for a long time, people saw it only as a purgatory to getting to the main store. But now with Horizon OS and Meta's open push to make it for a more open ecosystem, I do not think that devs need to get on main store to have a successful application. That's at least the trend I'm starting to see. But regarding that, in the talks of successful applications, there's a really important conversation coming out on free-to-play versus price. You guys all probably saw the Gorilla Tag news this week of doing $100 million plus in revenue. And it has become by far the single most successful application on the Quest store. And I think it's really pushed the envelope and Trojan horsed our whole industry to show what's going on there. And now I'm speaking with a lot of devs who had pay games and are looking, maybe I should be making my game free. And we saw a lot of premium games early on Quest launch. There were not very many free games in 21. Now I'm seeing a proliferation of a lot of free games, mostly social games. So I want to talk to see where you guys feel on monetizing revenue on the back end with free-to-play versus having a paid-for launch. And maybe Arturo, you can start us with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm heavily biased towards the premium games, particularly because we started as a web design agency. We've been around since 2007, and if Synth Riders didn't have a price point, we would have probably have to go on and get funding. But it allowed us to bootstrap ourselves and build a game and make revenue from it. And I think that's the beauty of the Quest store today. I see, it was pointed out on the keynote 2 days ago about how many games are single founders or two people teams, and I love that about the store. I love that about VR right now. It's still that way, and you have great games made by 1-2 people teams, and then they can charge for it and build a sustainable business. If that goes away, then we're all sorry, JP. We all have to come and knock your door, and sometimes that's not the best path, or it's not the path that creates the most independent studios. So I think a mix would be nice. I see the outliers like Gorilla Tag, like. It was also a single guy with a part-time job. I mean, he was doing it as a part-time gig, and it turned out great. That game worked, but I don't think that's true for every game. For Final Fury, we're actually intentionally building a deep single-player experience, so we don't have to go down the free route, so that we can recoup as soon as possible for the cost we've invested.
Almir, I know you guys had a premium game and are now thinking about different strategies, having a really successful premium game, but also seeing the shifting tide in the player demographics and user numbers. What do you think about this situation?
I think it depends who you're building for. I think if you're building for an older audience, the premium route makes sense because it's going to meet the expectations of the user. However, if you're trying to build, at least this is my personal perspective, is that if you're trying to build for the 9 to 17, 13 to 17, there are strong expectations met, so you would to some extent be going against the grain, and I know that can be a difficult challenge. From the perspective of why we decided to go from premium to free to play is to build games of scale. That is our goal, and we know that we can get that scale from free to play from the younger audience.
Do you think that has been a shifting consensus over time as the demographics of the VR community has changed? With the player base no longer being maybe having to have a PC and income rate, and we've now seen a younger audience. Has that been a catalyst to shift more towards free-to-play?
Definitely. I think we've seen an audience flip. Like in the last couple of years, we've seen the most engaged audience be that 13 to 17, and that is causing a huge change. But also there's another thing I want to note. I think we're seeing the exponential growth of 13 to 17, but I also think as they graduate to 18 to 24, that with 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, which is the ages of premium titles, I think they will seep back into premium experiences, and that trend will continue. Like, we're so focused on 13 to 17 now because it's the most engaged, but I don't think the engagement will drop off as those age groups transition to 18 to 24.
Do you think their willingness to put out for premium games becomes more likely?
As they enter the older demographic?
Right.
I believe so.
Yeah. Pablo, do you have anything you want to add on this with Headspace being from mobile to now XR?
Well, just that, Headspace Mobile has free options, right? And then there's also subscription options, and there's a gazillion different ways of introducing. In the XR one, it's a little more complicated though because it's a brand new genre. So, it kind of goes back to the Applog question too, which is ultimately the decision was just to put it out there with the price point and then adjust based on the response. Just sort of like go into the fire and see what happens. And I think that in this case there's a triple partnership that enabled that. So I think it sort of depends on the business case.
So regarding that, the triple partnership, the next area I want to move on to is talking about meta initiatives. So if you guys saw at the Meta keynote earlier, 2 days ago or yesterday, Anand Das was speaking about the Quest Lifestyle App Accelerator now funding different types of applications, right? A conscientious effort from Meta to focus in non-games and get developers to build things ideally to convert more users and not just work on the existing player base. So I know all of you guys have had an intimate relationship with Meta. I've all worked very closely with them. What do you guys think about Meta initiatives as an incentive to get developers to join and for players to join? And then how was your experience working with them? And Emily, I think I want to start with you.
Yeah. Meta, I think throughout their sort of entrance into VR and changing their name to Meta, they really put their name literally behind creating this industry and establishing a bunch of different markets. And one of those markets that they've been trying to establish for years is education. And I think that it's no secret that that was a huge benefit for us. We were working in schools pretty extensively, which made us a good partner for Meta and them trying to get headsets into classrooms. So they donated a bunch of headsets to us to get into classrooms. That created an existing relationship because our mission was aligned with their mission. They agreed with our approach and how we were designing experiences for schools. And so that gave us inside connections with Meta, and we were aligned with them, which then helped us get our app directly into the Quest store with their help on the inside, and we also got additional development support from them during the development of Nano. And I think that that's because Meta really wants to establish VR across different markets. They believe in it as a platform, as a technology, and so they are constantly looking for ways to expand the user base. And having a mission and a company and a product that aligns with what Meta's initiatives are, I think can be an absolute game changer in getting your product available and in front of audiences. So yeah, and they're doing new initiatives all the time. Education is just one, and lifestyle is another one.
So Pablo, most recently, you're the one too. I've worked with Meta for launching Headspace, and that was a really big internal initiative. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely need to pay attention to the Meta initiatives, because Meta's been single-handedly basically supporting the entire ecosystem for the past few years. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. And I mean, even you see the difference between their, level of support and other headset manufacturers. But one thing to note in terms of, for instance, the most recent one, the lifestyle push, or a couple things to note on that, really. One is that there is this use case out there that Meta is still on the hunt for. I think we're all on the hunt for the non-gamer to want to buy a headset. The single app that will make them buy a headset. We hope that that's Headspace XR for mindfulness. But everyone will try, and that's what you should be trying to do as a developer too. Is how do you get the non-gamer to buy a headset? And I think Meta will very much be paying attention to any initiatives that focus on that. The other thing to note is that Meta has been looking at, and Apple as well, obviously, the notion of the ecosystem of apps and how they can, play together. I mean, the desktop and mobile phone environments now have this sort of, they work in this shared ecosystem of apps, and the VR world just doesn't quite do that yet. I mean, there's a pointing toward it. There's this idea of it. There's Apple Intelligence, which will help with that too, and Meta's going to have their version of that too, where the apps will be able to talk to each other. And so thinking about your lifestyle app as part of this ecosystem, I think is going to be really important. Maybe there's some brainstorming that can happen when you're thinking about your app in terms of thinking about what would this be if it was two apps, or having two modes for it. And then the third is, I guess, there's a long tail on what pass-through is, right? I see pass-through as this necessary evil. I don't like pass-through. I don't like having the world projected back on my eyeballs. But you have to do it, and the reason you have to do it is because this is actually going towards, as we know, AR glasses. And I think it's the challenge right now as you work on, a lifestyle app, whether it's a drawing, art and craft. I like that that's a category, art and craft app. Is thinking about it not just its use case for the Quest, but its use case for future glasses, and trying to kind of solve for that with this effectively dev platform, which is pass-through. That's a challenge, but I think you have to go there, and I think if you go there with Meta, they'll help you. Last note, and then I'll stop talking, is definitely just a piece of advice. Meta is Byzantine, right? There's like heads of product. There's multiple heads of production, even just in VR. So find an advocate inside Meta, speak with them early and often, let them help you define what it is that you're building together. They want you to succeed, and just don't work in isolation. There's also an entire AR partnerships team that's working more on individual creators and bringing Spark developers into this type of field. So plenty of resources, and they want to know what you think about tools and all that stuff.
I think it's a really great point to bring up on. And Almir, I kind of want to get your take on that now, on if you believe it's really advantageous to build a relationship with Meta when you're building a game or a product.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. We were one of the studios that operated in silent, and we've found out the reasons why it's not great to do that. But right now we have a tight communication loop with Meta. We have intel on what the near future looks like. How do we optimize our strategy internally to fit that, so that we are maximizing the stuff that they're working on, and not having our own internal conception of what the future looks like.
Yes. So everyone, if you're a dev, you need to befriend a dev reel. It's going to be worthwhile. Arturo, I know you probably want to add
Yeah,
stuff to this too.
I want to add just some detail to that. But the answer obviously is yes, and they are the ones leading the funding by far. And I would say that also they're pretty transparent about what they want, and they have a shifting strategy. So 2 days ago, they said lifestyle. They're learning life. They're going after that. They spell out the categories. They're trying to help with use cases. I think if you talk to them, they'll deepen the use case for you. That they are pretty open. They want us all to succeed. And there'll be, if you listen, if you read the messages, there's no, I guess, Machiavellian thinking behind this. What I've learned, that they're really like, this is what we're trying to do, and this is what we're funding, and they even make suggestions. And so just really take that seriously. And then the other part is understand where their headset is at and what features. Like one day it's going to be mixed reality, the other day it's going to be hand tracking. Build for that use case. That's where they're putting their money. If you want to get their money, listen to what they're saying and follow their roadmap. And it will change. 6 months from now, it'll be different. And you got to hop on that train. And that's what we've been doing, frankly. And it works. And I think it's true for the other OEMs as well. Like we work with Pico, we work with Apple, we work with Sony. And for example, we have music. We've constantly tried to go like, do you want a big artist exclusive? And they're constantly like, we don't really care about that. We care about you marrying our OEM features to your game. And so that's been a consistent thing. And know that you're basically in a relationship where they're trying to build a device, they're trying to sync up with the content, and you guys have to sync up where they are in the roadmap. And if you do that, you'll be successful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I know you spent a lot of time thinking about it. We spent a lot of time privately talking about that. So I'm glad you're able to share. One other topic I did want to touch on, Impact Reality actually gave a great talk on this yesterday, but I do think it's important for us to discuss in the Quest ecosystem, which is marketing, and more specifically off-channel marketing. I think the first-party marketing, especially if you are on App Lab, is pretty much invisible. You have to have someone looking for direct search. So if you're not doing any marketing, you're SOL with anyone finding your game or product. Almir, I know you're very passionate about this, and you spent a lot of time thinking about this. So what do you think about off-channel marketing for applications on Quest?
I think that now that we saw the introduction of Lab more into the official Quest ecosystem, I received a couple emails from some of the larger XR gaming companies, and they're like, how does this affect the visibility that I'm used to having in a more closed ecosystem? And it's going to affect it a lot. I think we're going to really fight for visibility now. And I think the studios that don't have off-platform established brands where they can continuously reach their users whenever they want in whatever capacity are going to struggle greatly. Something that we really focused on was building our off-platform presence. So we essentially became our own creator, where we get to control what message we want to say to the user, how often we want to speak to them, and what we want to show them. And in the last year, we amassed about a little over 15 million views ourselves. And out of those 15 million views, we actually created these really warm audiences for ourselves. So, for example, any user that watched more than 10 videos at 100%, we pooled them into our audience. And what that did was give us independence from platform dependencies, because we could hit 300,000-400,000 really engaged users whenever we wanted with no platform dependence. And I think, if you haven't established that by now, I really think, let this be a signal that you should, because that Quest store is going to become a lot more competitive as it becomes more open.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Arturo, do you want to share anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, echoing those thoughts, and Almir, I still want to hear about how you did that in more detail. But like even when we launched in 2018, we built our own community. It was a small community, but that was the signal that Meta needed to see to put us in the store. I think there is this conversation of like, we'll help you. We know the store is going to drive the most sales, but you have to show us that you can create passion on your own and that you can create your own rally behind the game. So I think you absolutely need to think about that, and it's more, the engagement and the passion is probably more important than the numbers at one point, depending on how you see it. Clearly, you're successful in building a few hundred K there, but you know, if you can't quite do that, at least build the fire, the seed to the fire to the community.
What do you think about community management? So if you are garnering attention offsite, do you want to hold them into a Discord group or have someplace you can continue to contact them outside of the ads?
Absolutely, and Discord is essential, but you know, we have Facebook groups, we do a lot on Reddit, TikTok is getting more and more important. There's a lot of different channels that you need to be thinking about, and Discord is sort of our hardcore fans audience.
Yeah, quickly just to add to that, we use Discord as the bottom of our funnel. We funnel everything right into Discord because we figured it was the highest communication touch point because the ability to ping everybody. Like, our perception internally is that Discord is a replacement of mailing lists, especially given the type of demographic that lives on Discord. I mean, how often is someone in the 13 to 17 demographic checking their email? Probably not as often as they're checking their Discord.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Discord's become very evidently the third place for gamers. It seems to be that's pivotal and essential to building a game on
I just want to give a funny anecdote to that. I have some employees that don't answer me on email, but they'll answer me on Discord, so it's that true.
Yeah, we use our entire company internals on Discord, and that's how we speak with a lot of our founders as well. We usually use that as a signal of, are they really into VR? If so,
Right.
we'll find them on Discord. That's how we'll talk with each other. I do want to briefly touch on blue ocean applications, all right? So I think there's a lot of saturation in the market. You see a lot of formulas that maybe worked well early, and so people want to continue to build them, like first-person shooters. I mean, there's dozens and dozens on the store. Versus there's a lot of applications that when they're novel, they end up working really well. GT being the great example of that. There was not really a lot of physics-based movement after that. That did really well. It was a blue ocean for them and unlocked now a new sector of physics-based movement games. I think blue ocean can kind of be a trap because if you see something that hasn't been built, it either means no one's thought about it or has had the capacity, or someone's tried it and it didn't work. And as people who, you guys have all been pioneers in building new tech in the space, how do you think about building in a blue ocean and building to where you have limited competition but sufficient demand? And how do you test at that? I think, Emily, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it a lot, which is just timing. So much of it is timing, either because VR is an emerging market and every market within it is even more emerging. And I'm going to talk about education again. Education is a great example of that. There's not a lot of competition in education VR that exists because the market for education in classrooms is in its infancy. So if you're creating an education application, you're either hitting the market right as it's emerging and it's, you know, you're great timing, or you're in the business of trying to establish a market, which is incredibly risky. And so, yeah, I think as infrastructure and hardware develops, additional markets like education will come together. And so when we were looking at the Quest store, and like I mentioned already, we decided to make a game that is a game first. And our differentiation was that it's also educational. If you get good at the game, you are learning about cell biology, and that was sort of our differentiation and how we stood out from other games on the platform, because there are so many new games coming out. And so we leaned into the sort of new emerging, doesn't quite exist market with the sort of established meeting the users where they're at, which is they want to play a game. And so that was our approach to it, and really just focused on the quality of the content, the quality of the experience, and making sure we were designing for VR first. It made sense that this was an application that was in VR, and you can't play it on any other platform because it doesn't make sense the way that it's designed. And so that was our approach in sort of differentiate ourselves, and it worked really well for us. We got App of the Year, and we're one of the top-rated apps on the store. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of threading the needle. You know, you got to kind of find the right area to land.
I think that's a really thoughtful insight and right way to look at things. Almir, I think you sit in a very interesting scenario where when you guys started, or you sit in a sector that's somewhat competitive, but it's a massive market. How do you think about that competition within the space?
Well, the way that we've approached it is, like, we have domain expertise in combat. That's all that we want to be known for. We don't want to work across different verticals. We want to be the combat specialist in XR. And what that really means is we want to solve problems at depth. So we're constantly looking at what are the friction points of our users, how much is it going to take to solve them, and what kind of value add do they bring to the overall experience. So that domain of expertise with the perspective of problem solving has been like our internal mantra.
Got it. Yeah, I think you guys have done really well at that. I think diving deep is a great way to put it, right? Because there have been some combat games before, but they're very lackluster in in comparative feel. So diving deep is a great way to hedge.
Quickly, just to add, we've also seen games that do combat really well, and then they'll go do something completely different. But that combat genre needs to deepen. Like our perspective is that combat is the most immersive experience you can have in XR. But if we don't deepen our investment in it and solve the toughest problems, we'll never get to that Class A type of experience. So we've decided to take it on ourselves.
Arturo, so you're an old timer in the space. You've been here for a little bit. So I'm kind of condescending listening back myself. But anyways, you've been in the XR industry for a while. So you have a lot of first mover advantage. You were the first to do a lot of different things. What do you think about competition in the previous landscape versus where we currently stand?
I mean, clearly it's a lot more competitive, but there's still a lot of space. Even we announced Final Fury a while ago, and there's still no classic arcade fighting game besides that one. On the flip side, it's been really hard to build, and that's why we haven't launched yet, right? Because there is no standards, no patterns to look at. But that's the opportunity. If I try to build Street Fighter like type of game in a console, I'm going to be like, how do I position it amongst the 60 others that are out there? In VR, I can say we're building that and nobody else is doing it. And that's still true for a lot of categories. And maybe like you cannot build the fighting game right now because there's so many fighting games out there. But we can kind of find a subsection that is specialized. And there's tons of opportunity in that regard to be the gold standard. And there's tons of things that may not make the most commercial sense now, but you can put your foot in the door and build up to it. And then the other thing is with mixed reality and hand tracking, you can bring new tech and revise previous VR ideas and adapt them to the new mediums.
Pablo, do you have anything you want to add on this?
Yeah. Well, okay. So in Headspace XR, very, very blue ocean concept, right? We have a virtual playground for the mind. It's open world, so that there's taking some aspects of games, but applying it to mindfulness in the way that Headspace does it, which is finding users where they are, physically and emotionally. So total blue ocean concept. But you got to start, even with that, you start with a very, very clear problem statement. In this case, I think it's 91% of Gen Z says that they have symptoms of depression or stress. Okay, wow, let's start with that. That's a huge thing. Where are they? Okay, well, are they using headsets? And can we use a tried and true method of Headspace, which is finding users where they are physically and emotionally, and bring that into headsets, and what's that Venn diagram? What does that look like? And so we have this completely new genre that emerged from that with using very known techniques, which is problem statement and proven approach from a known brand. So even that, it's almost impossible not to have blue ocean. Blue ocean, like they have an entirely new UX paradigm. I think it's all blue ocean from here on out. And even, I think, JP, and I were talking earlier, just getting the natural input aspect of stuff is completely new. And which is why, games like Swords and Minute are actually are getting very popular, because it's solving for certain motions that haven't been solved for yet.
Right.
And so even just basic ones, it's all blue ocean right now.
And there's so much blue ocean in the space, right? And the general consensus here is find something that you think would work best in VR, right? That can be built that hasn't been built. That's the general consensus, right? Okay, I think we need to move on to QA since we have about 10 minutes left. So we'll get the mic. I'll go do a quick self-plug real quick too. So I'm JP from Hartman Capital. We're one of the most prolific investors in the Quest ecosystem. If you are building on Quest, I want to talk to you. So find me on either LinkedIn or Twitter, and always happy to have these kind of conversations. But I think we'll open up the floor now. Any questions?
Okay. Howdy. So, right now, of course, MR is sort of the next thing with Quest 3 sort of and Apple Vision Pro. Now that market share seems to be significantly smaller than like the Quest 2. What sort of strategies towards I guess capturing as much of that MR market share as possible? I guess like looking to the future, is that something thinking about, or I guess what's the different go-to-market strategy for an MR software rather than a more traditional VR game? Traditional in the sense, I guess it's been around for a few years now.
Almir, you want to start that?
Yeah, I could definitely take it. Regarding go-to-market, I think there's two big differences in the way that you're perceiving value. I mean, you're showing your personal space, so you're already working with this like hesitation from the consumer to want to do that. And then there's this other difference of you're no longer potentially moving a character around with an analog stick or specific buttons. Like your body is literally the input now. And the way that you convey the value with those two different challenges is very tough. The way that we're going to launch our MR project very soon, unannounced just yet, but right? So the way that we've been approaching is we're trying to find out where the MR audience lives online. And the most efficient way that we've been doing it is through keyword attachment. We're scanning for keywords. Where are they using the word MR? What are they using it with? And then creating audience when we're combining those two keywords. For example, like MR and game. We'll pull audiences out of that to ensure that it's a warm audience, that when we go, we're talking to the right people and we're not necessarily using our resources in other areas.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there. Do we have any more questions? No? Okay. One other thing I did want to ask, since we did have spare time, is this one's really for Almir and Arturo. If you guys were to go start a studio again today from scratch, right, in 2024, what's the biggest lesson you would have wanted to know previously, and what do you think you would build? Yeah, I didn't tell this one beforehand, so they got to think about it.
No, well, I mean, you did put it on the notes, and funny enough, I wouldn't really do much different. We have been just very lucky, and we've had a few miracles happen to us as this happened. So I think you got to sort of read where the wind blows. And for us, we were a decentralized company with Latin America people, and turns out that game studios that have international presence is really favorable in current conditions, so that worked out. We were a work-for-hire shop originally. It turns out that set us up perfectly to build in Horizon Worlds as much as we're building for ourselves. So that turned out really well for us. And we built in early access and deal with community, and that's gone really well. So in fact, one of the things that I've learned with Final Fury is we've been really precious about it and try to build. There's more expectations behind the studio, and I keep telling the team we got to remember what we succeeded in with Synth Riders and just launch it and get it out and be rough and build it with community. Try to go back to our roots. So in fact, every time that I think about what should Klooch do, I think about what's work and what's in our DNA. And the only recommendation I would say is just all of that comes from who we were inherently. We didn't try to I've had ideas where I try to, something makes strategic sense, but it's not in the company's DNA, and that's never gonna work. So always know yourself and listen to who you are, who your team makeup is, what you really are passionate about, and then try to align it with where the wins are. But it's a very personalized answer, really.
I mean, that was a lot of great touch points. The only thing that I would add is one thing that we did really early on is we would reference traditional gaming, like they do this in console, and in reality, that I think hurt us a lot early on. And when we figured out what XR first meant, that's when we saw the exponential rise in our quality of products. So that's a good point. I would move away from referencing traditional gaming as much as possible because it's such a different vertical.
We have a question.
I have a question in terms of when you're building and marketing and finding your audiences. Was your intention just North America users, or also
For me personally, the way that we've approached marketing is like cost effective. Ultimately, it works better with the English speaking audiences. But when we do have a campaign, when we're trying to build community, it's not so much to drive sales. We'll specifically target specific keywords like the Quest 3, like the Quest 2, like VR games in places like secondary markets like France, Germany, Spain, and then we've seen substantial upticks when we do that. So it really depends on what the objective is of that specific campaign.
Yeah. I'll echo that. We think about it very internationally, but it is about segmenting for VR users. Don't go for there's a lot of eyeballs, but not necessarily knowing if you're targeting VR users or not.
We have time for one more. Yeah, do you want to?
I just want to ask, you noticed a few common themes. You said that you really look at for clues, you look at what's in your DNA. You guys talked about, the sword fighting and the combat that you focus on, and you're very clear. I want to make sure that experience is frictionless, VR first. And I love hearing that. That's how our studio thinks as well. But I think very often, whether you're engaging with Meta or other stakeholders, or sometimes venture capitalists that do not have the same pure focus, there's a dilution of that focus. As an ecosystem, I run my own studio. Do you guys have ideas where maybe studios like ours can come together more often to just talk about general things that we're doing in the space, especially in the non-competitive area, to share more knowledge for that kind of pure VR first focus? Do you guys have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little bit to that. That the most successful devs I know are friends with other devs, right? Yeah, and they're spending time, they're looking at problems together, right? And I mean, the best thing to do there is for you to also be value additive, right? Come with something specific you're working on. Hey, I'm working on this. I'm finding XYZ problem, right? My retention looks like this, but I don't want it to look like that, right? So, this is a very positive sum industry still, right? It's not really taking away. So, I would recommend finding other people who are building in the same vertical as you and being willing to share with them. And a lot of people are willing to share back.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think that the VR is dead slogan is actually helping us out because it's bringing people that are passionate about the medium and not people that are here for money. And that passion is felt. It's evident in our community. I'm in love with that part of us. And let's keep making money while VR is dead.
That's it. Yeah, I think with that we'll end it here. Let's give it out for these guys, right? Good. Always with the zingers.